Good evening, directors, staff, and members of the public. I will now call this October 11th, 2022 regular business meeting to order. I'll begin tonight by acknowledging that buildings within Minneapolis Public Schools are located on the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, translating to the land where the waters reflect the skies, or cloudy waters. MPS recognizes the original peoples of this place and is committed to make ongoing efforts to educate the community about the relationship Dakota people have to this area, both historically and today as they remain here in their home. Thank you. Clerk Inns, will you please call the roll for the record?
Director Arneson?
Here.
Director El-Amin?
Here.
Director Ali?
Here.
Director Cerrillo?
Here.
Director Inns is here. Director Jourdain?
Here.
Director Booker?
Here.
Director Caprini?
Present.
Student Representative Austin? Student Representative Wesson?
Here.
Chair Ellison.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Next, we will approve our agenda for the rest of the meeting. Director Arneson, will you please move approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Our agenda's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries, and we have an approved agenda. Director Inns, can I please get a motion to approve the minutes before us?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Approval of the minutes for the September 13th meeting has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or corrections? Seeing no discussion or corrections, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries and the minutes are approved. For our next item, I will turn it over to Interim Superintendent Cox to make a few recognitions. Interim Superintendent Cox, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. It's my honor to begin tonight, this meeting, by recognizing two recent important observances within the MPS community, as well as sharing about a celebration of a school's milestone. We'll start by acknowledging that yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day here in Minneapolis and in a growing number of jurisdictions across the country. MPS marked and recognized Indigenous Peoples Day and its significance through an event here at Davis, which was live streamed so others could join us. Thank you to Jennifer Simon and the staff of our American Indian Education Department, and especially the wonderful American Indian families and students who shared their time and their insights with us. We're grateful to have learned about the history behind this important day and the many ways our dominant systems fight to honor actions and people who discriminated against Native people and culture. As a result of events like the one we had here yesterday, those who attended can better understand how very invisible our Native families often feel. While this is certainly difficult on an individual level, that pain is heightened with the knowledge that our nearly 600 U.S. Indian tribes were here long before any white people came to North America. Giving voice to our American Indian students and families is not only one way towards academic success for our students, but an important way for our country to fully embrace all we are and all we can be. Yesterday's event was just the beginning of opportunities within MPS to learn even more about Native American history in Minnesota as we look forward to Native American Heritage Month in November and American Indian Awareness and Family Involvement Week. At last month's board meeting, I shared that we were joining the nation in celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. One highlight of our marking this special month was a discussion with Juan Diego, the Venezuelan artist responsible for part of our art display in the Davis Gallery. Mr. Diego shared his thoughts on art and the immigrant experience at our monthly meeting for staff at Davis and other non-school buildings. The meeting was live streamed and recorded and will be available later for viewing. I also want to add that within this overall month of celebration, MPS has its own Mps Latin Heritage Day, which falls on the second Tuesday in October, which is today. One way we marked this special day was a wonderful family event at Bancroft this past Saturday, and I was lucky enough to attend. We had around 100 families and children attend that day. While the children participated in a soccer clinic, family members from the Latino Parent Advisory Committee, better known as LPAC, and other school staff shared ideas about how they can support one another and their children in our schools. Everyone enjoyed the dynamic musical performance by Mexico Lindo, which includes some of our very own MPS students. Thank you to everyone who helped make this important day special, and to the board members who were also able to attend. I also want to say that while it is the right thing to formally honor our families and our students during these national recognitions, more important is that we do so every day of the year, academically, socially, emotionally, and otherwise. I'm proud to be part of a community that believes that and is working to achieve this vision. Finally, you good? All right. Finally, I want to recognize that we had a major milestone celebrated by Edison High School community marking their 100th year. Hundreds, I mean hundreds, of families, students, and alumni enjoyed dances, homecoming celebrations, a parade, an all-school reunion, and a big pancake breakfast. I enjoyed every minute of the events that I attended, but I especially enjoyed co-leading the Future Tommies group with Pillsbury Principal Skowronek. As you can see, oh, there I am, the Future Tommies. As you can see from some of the wonderful photos, courtesy of Jason Norden, Beth Rapsitz, and Andy Benson, and the Edison Principal Aaron Morney, Edison students, family, and alumni really know how to celebrate. So much has changed in our community and the world of education since the first bricks were laid at Edison. I want to congratulate the Edison community on taking the time to celebrate, reflect, and renew. And I want to specifically thank and acknowledge everyone who was involved in the planning of this wonderful weekend of celebration. Congratulations, Edison, and here's to the next 100 years. Thank you, Chair Ellison and board members, for the opportunity to highlight these 3 recognitions.
Thank you, Interim Superintendent Cox. And on behalf of the school board, I want to thank everyone who worked to help our students, staff, and community recognize and mark Hispanic Heritage Month, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Edison's Centennial. Thank you. Next, we will hear from those who signed up to provide comments here tonight. As staff projects the speaker list and our first speaker comes to the podium, I'll remind us all of the public comment guidelines. Our goal here is to hear from those who have signed up in a fair and respectful way. To do this, we ask each commenter to begin by stating your name and relationship to Minneapolis Public Schools. Keep comments within the 2-minute limit, or 4 minutes if using an interpreter. Do not mention identifiable information about individual staff members or students, and do not use profanity, insults, or threats. If these guidelines aren't followed, I will provide a warning, and then if needed, I will turn off the microphone and end your comment time. And finally, please remember that this is a time for the board to hear from community, so we will not respond in the moment to comments or questions. If needed, staff may follow up or connect with you based on your comment. Gary Marvin Davidson, will you please come to the podium and begin your comment?
Gary Marvin Davis and New Salem Education Initiatives, from the Davis Center, teaching students academically abused for decades by the Minneapolis Public Schools. Extended comments at newsalemeducation.blogspot.com. Of the many books that I read each week, none has been more moving than the 1619 Project, edited by Nicole Hannah-Jones, that tells the story of American history from a very distinctly African-American point of view. As a person who has a doctorate in Taiwanese history and 7 published books, I am in communication with scholars and journalists throughout the nation. Heard from Nafisa Thompson Spires, who wrote a marvelous fictional account of what a glorious moment it was when Shirley Chisholm was elected to Congress back in 1971. Scholars and journalists in many quarters know your sordid stories. And as I continue to update understanding the Minneapolis Public Schools' current condition, future prospect, your current story is going to be told as well. I hope you make the right decision, or that is, I hope that the new board makes the right decision in either selecting Rochelle Cox or someone that's trained in under her, because there are no good superintendent options externally. They don't exist. They're all trained the same way. But know this, your story will be recorded accurately, and if the evidence continues to mount that Jenny Arneson is attempting to control this process through her puppet, Kim Ellison, that story will be told as well.
Thank you. Latrice Cullum? Is Latrice here? Julia Pringle?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Julia Pringle. I'm with Minnesota State Director for the National Parents Union. And I wanted to say that this week is the National Week of Action Against School Pushout. So I just want to make some comments as to some suspensions policies that I'd like to see happen. One is a grievance process for parents and families to file a process against the suspensions that they feel may not be that they don't agree with. The district has, I've learned that the district has laid out some plans or are implementing some plans and policies that will sort of change the direction of suspensions. But I think a better way of getting a clear understanding of what's happening with suspensions is to get it directly from parents and students as opposed to just system folks. Also, a racial incident process and protocol for students and staff when they feel that racial incidents are happening to them. That should be clearly stated, and students, families, teachers, everybody should understand what that process is. Also, just want to reiterate the district had promised transparency around ESSER funds, so would still asking for a dashboard when it comes to ESSER funds. Families want to know what ESSER 1, 2, and what ESSER 3 funds will be spent on. Thank you.
Katie Campoff?
All right. Good evening, directors. My name is Katie Campoff, and I'm a Minneapolis resident, Henry Special Education Inclusion teacher, and MFT 59 union steward. While I was laying my clothes out today, I grabbed this pin that a Henry graduate of 2019 made for me in 2018 when this board cut nearly $1.9 million from Henry High School, leading to us losing 18 of our beloved staff members. It reads, PHHS, keep our teachers. I actually had to Windex it because there was some dust on it. So here we are, 4.5 years later, and this very board is soon to be responsible for ripping away a popular program and its beloved teacher community members from Henry High School. And we are asking you once again to please let us keep our teachers. I hear this board do a lot of things in the name of equity. As we all know, words have meaning. So let me tell you how I've interpreted what equity in education to be defined as. It focuses on taking those opportunities presented to students and infusing them with support and resources to turn the education system into a level playing field. I studied the CDD. I showed up at community forums where our questions were taken and screened. Many of my colleagues and my questions were never answered. For example, why is a school that is 92% racially isolated like Henry losing an entire engineering and communication studies program and our 3 beloved career and technical education teachers that will be moved in the fall to the North CTE Center? 3 teachers who combined have taught at Henry for nearly 3 decades. Teachers that run our popular Herobotics team, our Henry News Hour, take free professional pictures of our sports and drama clubs. They run our Latino Student Council, and often one is the only available Spanish speaker in our school building. In addition, 2 of those 3 teachers are veteran Black teachers. Director El-Amin and Cerrillo, during the strike, I watched you in a Racial Justice Network forum on March 9th, questioning why MFT 59 negotiators had not agreed to language around protecting teachers of color in times of layoffs. It was clear to me you care about our teachers of colors. So I am asking, have you spoken to the Black teachers at Henry who will be displaced by this move? Have you talked to them about how they feel? Has anyone asked the opinions of these CTE teachers at Henry or other schools who will be displaced? Also, who are these other schools?
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
You can spend $90 million on a beautiful, shiny new tech building, but without a loving teaching community members like we have at Henry, it's just a cold building without a soul.
Thank you. Tanya Drung?
I did register to speak, but actually I'm going to yield my time to Maria from National Parents Union instead.
Buenas tardes, voy a necesitar intérprete, por favor.
Good afternoon.
Buenas tardes a todos los miembros de la mesa directiva y superintendente.
Good afternoon to the superintendent and to the members of the board.
Mi nombre es María Cisneros.
My name is Maria Cisneros.
Soy miembro del Sindicato Nacional de Padres de Minnesota.
I am member of the Union of the Parents of Minnesota.
Estoy aquí
I am here today
porque siguen los problemas en la escuela Anderson.
because the problems at the school Anderson continue.
Siguen las peleas.
The fights continue.
Ya hemos tenido reuniones con el asociado del superintendente,
We have had meetings with the superintendent associate,
pero no basta de reuniones y reuniones. Queremos acción.
but meetings and meetings are not enough. We need some action.
Queremos un plan escrito
We want to have a written plan
de lo que los padres han pedido para mejorar la escuela Anderson.
So what the parents have been asking in order to improve Anderson School
Por seguridad de nuestros niños y nuestros jóvenes.
for the safety and security of our children and our youth.
No queremos que pasen desgracias, queremos prevenir.
We are here to prevent tragedies. We do not want them to happen.
Es importante que pongan atención y a poner acción, por favor.
It is very important that you all pay attention and take some action now
Por nuestros jóvenes, por la seguridad de nuestros jóvenes.
for the safety of our children and our youth.
Y no nomás en la escuela de Anderson, hay otras escuelas públicas de Minneapolis que están pasando más situaciones con nuestros niños.
And the school of Anderson is not an isolated case. There are plenty of schools that have problems of this type.
Hay casos que también están pasando abusos en los buses.
There are also cases of abuse taking place in the buses.
Es importante que cuando contraten buses se aseguren de que de perdida traigan kit de primeros auxilios porque ni eso traen.
It is very important that you are sure that any hired service for bus transportation carries kits for aid because not even they have carrying that.
Yo trabajo con niños y siempre me piden que tenga los primeros auxilios por cualquier emergencia.
I work with children and it is my responsibility to have a first aid kit.
Es importante que pongamos atención por nuestros niños, porque todos los que estamos trabajando aquí o que estamos en la mesa directiva o maestros o directores, subdirectores, están siendo pagados por nuestros hijos. Y es una burla que no estén poniendo atención.
And it has become a joke that you guys do not pay attention, even knowing that the salary that all of you get paid is because of our children. So we have to pay attention to what our children need.
Les pido por favor que pongamos acción
So I want you to start playing actions now.
inmediatamente, por
Immediately,
favor, por
please.
nuestros niños
For our
y jóvenes.
children and our
Gracias.
youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosalia Aka? Is Rosalia here? Jessica Flanagan?
Hi, I'm Jessica Flanagan. I'm a Minneapolis resident, MPS parent, MPS grad, and a licensed school nurse with MPS. I came here tonight to talk to you all because I'm one of the about 200 employees who have been not paid correctly for the the entire school year. I'm going to give you a very brief bit of that because I actually want to use most of my 2 minutes to talk about the school lunch situation because I work at Wellstone International High School, and as a school nurse, I feel compelled to speak about what's happening with the lunches. Quickly, my last paycheck was finally correct, but since summer school, I've been not paid the amount I'm supposed to be being paid, less on my paychecks. I have an email track of that, and I was going to tell you all about it in a detailed speech, but I don't want to take my time to do that. am asking for more communication from you all and the superintendent and payroll and HR so we can know what's going on. Because when I'm sending emails and asking like, I got paid as a 50% employee, but I'm a 70% employee, where's my money? And I get silence. I have so much faith in staying with MPS, but it starts to dwindle when no one's saying back to me, hey, you're important, and I get just an auto email. We get a lot of emails, we can't respond, right? So please try to be more communicative with us about what's going on at payroll. About school lunches, there's been no movement. Wellstone International High School continues to receive the cold package lunches. 100% of our students are new immigrants to this country. I see issues with nutrition on a daily basis. I see kids whose stomachs are hurting because they're having these cold sandwiches or they won't eat the cold sandwiches. I see kids coming to school as the weather's getting colder, not dressed appropriately. There will be no warm food for them at school, and I'm sad as a parent, as a nurse, as a person that frankly loves these young people. And also last week there was a day, it was the 6th, when only 20 lunches showed up, and our principal, who is still the lunch lady, had to order pizza from 3 different pizzerias to get lunch fed to our students, and they all came to class 40 minutes late. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila Walker.
Hello, my name is Sheila Walker. I'm an early intervention teacher with Minneapolis Public Schools. I have worked at the school district for 10 years, and I'm here to talk about issues with payroll. When I first started with MPS 10 years ago, I was not aware that I should be extremely diligent about reviewing my paychecks. 2 years into my teaching career here at MPS, I was curious about how I might move up a lane. And when I inquired about it, I was told MPS had placed me in the wrong lane based on my education and experience. I had been shorted thousands of dollars because of this error. In talking with my colleagues, this was commonplace. I was only able to receive 1 year of retro pay and lost thousands of dollars at the time. Since then, I've learned to keep my eye on my paycheck. On July 1st of this year, I noticed another substantial discrepancy in my paycheck. I notified payroll by email and did not receive any reply at the time. Several weeks later, I received an email literally saying nothing more than, "Was this solved?" I immediately replied no and never heard from payroll again. It has been 3 months, and I have tried to email various people within MPS from the very top to the very bottom to no avail. I want to be paid fully for the time I work, which is not what happened 10 years ago, and it's not happening now. I have exhausted all of my connections and methods of asking for help. I stand here tonight and am pleading with you to investigate the payroll issues. There are many employees besides myself who need help and don't know where to turn because we are not being heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Turner.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent Cox, everyone here and online. My name is Rashad Turner. I'm the President and Executive Director for Minnesota Parent Union, nonprofit education advocacy organization. We partner with parents statewide, and as education advocates, we want to help parents fundamentally change our education system. Parents deserve to know how our schools are doing, and that's why I'm here this evening to present a resolution around transparency. Before I hand over the resolution to the board, I want to make sure that we're all clear as to why transparency is needed. Parents deserve to know how schools are doing, not only so they can find quality schools, but also so they can be good partners with those schools in hopes of improving them. My grandma always says, if you knew better, you'd do better. And that is the spirit of this campaign. Many people blame parents for not being involved, and I do air quotes because I think parent involvement is sort of defined by privileged folks. But many people blame parents for not being involved in their child's education. Those same people fail to mention that parents across this district trust in the school leaders and teachers who tell them that everything is good at their school. Recent data, as most people are aware of, but maybe not, 82% of black children attending MPS schools cannot read at grade level. 92% of those children cannot do math at grade level. When it comes to students who qualify for FRL, same thing, about 80% can't read at grade level. Special ed students, right, our children who are receiving special ed services, also about 80% can't read at grade level. I know it's hard to stomach, it hurts. Thinking about the fact that this district is on track to leave a whole generation of children behind. A generation that will be more prepared to stand outside of Merwin's than to be productive members of our communities. The Titanic has sunk. Give parents transparency so we can help get our children off the life rafts that Superintendent Graff left them on. If I can, I would like to present this resolution to you, Chair.
Can you give it to Jennifer? Oh, where's Jennifer? Give it to Ryan.
I won't hurt you.
Oh, okay. Come on. Nate Hart Anderson, thank you.
Hello, school board. Thank you for listening to me. My name is Nate Hart Anderson. I'm an adult educator. I actually work right down the street at 800 West Broadway. I'm here to speak about a serious and recurring issue. For the past 3 years, the district has not given adult educators their annual step increases as laid out in our contract. In each of the past 2 years, we have had to file a grievance with the district. Afterwards, the steps were rightfully granted. We have done the same this year, but this is not an acceptable way to do things. Additionally, we are not being granted percent increases clearly enumerated in our most recent contract. I will end by saying that many of my colleagues are currently working and teaching because many of our students take classes at night, and so they cannot be here. But all adult education teachers urge the district to honor the contract and pay our adult educators what the contract says we should be paid. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Latrice Cullum or Rosalia Aka show up? Latrice, Rosalia? Okay, that ends our public comment for this evening. I again want to thank everyone who took the time to share your perspective with us. We will now take a 15-minute recess. Directors, we will be back in here at 6:15.
Yes, this one's on finance, one
I will now call this meeting back to order and turn it over to Interim Superintendent Cox to provide the superintendent's report. Directors, we will pause for questions after staff provide updates.
All right, thank you, Chair Ellison, and good evening, directors, student representatives, and those joining us here tonight. My team and I have a few updates to share with you this evening, including on enrollment, actions to boost academic outcomes, and the strategic plan. But first, I'd like to share a few items happening around the district and that will soon be coming here to the board. I want to start by reminding everyone that parent-teacher conferences are happening next week on Wednesday, October 19th. I want to encourage our families to take the time to talk to your children's teachers in as much detail as you need in order to understand how you can support your child's education. Our conferences are strategically scheduled to occur once our teachers have had a chance to get to know students, but early enough that teachers and caregivers can partner on planning for the rest of the year to support our students. These meetings are for you and your child's teachers to work together to steer your child to academic success. On our website and MPS YouTube channel, families can find a video that walks through what to expect at conferences. Judges will pause for questions after staff provide their updates. At next week's Board Finance Committee, we will be bringing forth for consideration a few needed budget adjustments to fund the academic strategies you'll hear about from Dr. Fearing shortly, to respond to safety concerns happening in our community and around our schools, and for the construction project at the CTE Center and North High School overages, and to provide hot lunch service to our students at Wellstone in their new place. On school and public safety, we continue to partner with officials from the City of Minneapolis and other agencies to address safety concerns around our schools and properties, as well as for students traveling to and from school. But the level of violence experienced in the first couple of months of this school year, especially involving guns, requires MPS to put in place some additional safety and security measures to do our part to keep our students and staff safe when on MPS property. I share the frustration about this being where we need to spend resources, and I hope these are temporary measures, while our society works collectively to address both the short and the long-term responses and root causes of what's happening in our communities. But I also know these steps are necessary, and my team and I are here to do everything we can to support the needs of our students and schools, whatever they may be. Additionally, as the board and district have called it for many, many, many times, policymakers must address the proliferation of guns in our communities. The ease of access to guns has created a situation where it seems we're now learning weekly of another high school sporting event ended by gunshots. This has never been acceptable, and it must not be normalized. There are too many guns in our community, and it's too easy for young people to get them. We need something to be done on gun control now. While the added measures we're putting in place focus on the security of our schools and our sites, we continue to work to meet mental health and resource needs of our students within our schools. From the added student support positions agreed to as part of our teacher and ESP negotiations to school-based mental health providers, to the implementation of our climate framework, we are focused on providing our students with what they need, both academically and with their physical and mental health. Because I've had countless conversations with my colleagues, I know the topic of school safety has been a front and center for districts across Minnesota and the country this year. As school districts work to protect our students and staff, we reiterate our call to every policymaker and official across local, state, and federal levels to address this issue at a systematic level so we can return our full focus to student learning and running schools. I also want the board to know that as part of our continuing implementation of the academic plan and to support the programming put in place in the comprehensive district design, we are working through some potential changes to both middle and high school start and end times. As we know, these types of changes have many different impacts that need to be considered. We're in discussions with many different stakeholders to understand different perspectives and to process the impacts alongside the potential benefits of any changes. We'll continue to update board members as this process continues ahead of any vote that might be needed to modify bell times. Next, I'll ask several staff members to provide updates. First, Executive Director of Engagement and External Relations, Tyrese Cox, will provide an update on student enrollment. Tyrese, please go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you, directors and superintendent. I am going to give a very brief update on enrollment as I have the past couple of months. I want to remind everyone that these are not the official numbers, but it's just to give you a comparison in time where we are today compared to this time of year last year. What you will see is that we are students that are enrolled and have shown up is about 27,756, which is just about 1,300 plus students fewer than we had same time of year last year. Now, again, these are not official numbers. The numbers may shift slightly over the coming days, and I will give an official enrollment count during my presentation next month. So, thank you. So as it relates to where we are this time of year, each year we do staffing adjustments based on which students actually show up in schools. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the staffing adjustment process, purely how that happens, not what the end outcome is for it. So currently we are meeting weekly, a cross-functional team of associate superintendents, human resources, enrollment, finance, and a variety of staff members are meeting to look at the numbers that we have in front of us. And those numbers are comprised of students that enroll versus students that register. What's the difference? Enrollment is really an expression of interest. So families may come in and enroll in a school, complete the enrollment papers down in the enrollment center, but that does not necessarily mean that they will show up on the first day of school. That happens for a variety of reasons. We start the enrollment process early in January or thereabouts, and life happens for families. People may move in the city, they may move out of the city, they may apply to another school inside the district, and so there's a little bit of shifting that happens over time when school starts. So we are looking at those numbers and making sure that we are counting the bodies that actually show up. And then the second part of that is, again, who are the students that actually are in school? And that's what we call e-tagging. How do we count the students that are in seats in a particular school? And then there is a third part of this, and that is a 15-day drop. While someone may have expressed interest, while they may have registered, we have 15 days to identify if they are actually coming to that school or not. After 15 days of non-attendance, then we are required to drop them from our registration. The last part of that is making adjustments, recommendations, which we share with the teachers union. Here's what we are seeing in terms of these schools may have more students than we anticipated. This school may have fewer students than anticipated, and we need to shift some teaching staff or staff in general from one place to the other. We make those recommendations to the teachers union. And then lastly, the official numbers are reported, and that will be sometime late this month, October, early November, which I will report to this group next month. So that is the staffing adjustment process. Thank you. Now I'd like to revisit focus schools. So last month I talked to you a little bit about 3 focus schools, and those are the schools that we've identified for a variety of reasons, schools that we really want to give a greater touch to support them in their enrollment increases. And we identified those schools because they had space in their building. They had low enrollment, and they had a great opportunity to increase their enrollment. They had very exciting magnet themes, either STEM or STEAM. And then lastly, we have put some pretty significant capital investments into those schools, which created a great opportunity for supporting growth at those schools. So I'm excited to say at the 3 focus schools, we have filled all of our seats at those 3 schools with the exception of 7 seats across the schools. All of them have met their projections. That does not mean that the building is full, but based on what we projected, we have filled all of those seats with the exception of 7 seats. I think that's pretty exciting. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on retention. That is another part of our enrollment growth strategy. We've got to retain the kids that we have. And so the ways that we are going to do that is we are going to focus on increasing both the student and family experience at the schools. We're going to ensure that the magnet theme is evident. When you walk into these schools, we want to make sure that everyone who comes through those doors or goes past on the street, it's clear what their magnet theme is. And so we'll start to focus differently on that. We want to identify and increase or diversify community partners. Who are we working with at each of those schools? How do we support student learning? How do we support the student experience? And who are the partners that are joining us in doing that? And then we are also really making sure that the out-of-school time programming is with intentionality. We want to make sure that every out-of-school experience that we offer at those 3 schools are robust, they're intense, and that they are really very connected to the themes at the schools. And so who's working on this? We are monitoring what's happening at these schools again every week. And another section of staff members are looking at what's working, where are opportunities to adjust. And that work is happening with someone from academics, so we're looking at performance. How are kids performing academically at those schools? I've done a little bit of secret shopper. Let me go into the school and look to see how are people being greeted, what's on the walls, what's on the marquee outside. Again, that's around aesthetics, because we know that matters to people. People want to walk into a place that they feel excited about, that they're welcomed warmly. What's the climate and culture? How is that being lifted? What are the communication needs at the school? We are looking at each of their websites. We are doing a pretty intense update of all of their websites to make sure that it reflects the theme, that it has all the current information, and it has the things that would be attractive to potential families. We are making sure that there is a bit of a tighter handoff between pre-K and K. We don't want, at these schools or any schools, but we're focusing on these schools, we don't want pre-K to be treated like a tenant in the building, but it really is part of the school community, with the hopes that those families would see themselves in the schools and register to keep their young person there. And then lastly, what are the external supports? How are we making sure that our charitable contributions are flowing to those schools? How are our corporate partners viewing those schools, and what are they interested in contributing, either in dollars or in other kinds of resources? What are the things that they that are experts in? An example, this is not happening, but let's say Boston Scientific, you are experts in that work. How is that showing up in these schools? How can we partner with you so that the kids in these schools can see professionals in the field and strengthen their learning experience there? So that's a bit about enrollment, where we are this time of year, focus schools, and I will come back next month and give you an update on official numbers and what we're seeing in focus schools. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tyrese. And I would just like to say the work that you're doing in the focus schools is not only for those focus schools this year, but that are learning so that we can expand the things that are working to other schools next year. So it really is part of a long-term enrollment strategy. So thank you for that. Next, I'm going to introduce Senior Academic Officer Dr. Amy Fearing to share about some actions we're taking to address the academic outcome data shared last month. Amy, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, board members, Chair Ellison, student reps, and the public. It's an honor to be here again with you tonight, whether it's the board meeting or the committee of the whole. So I wanted to go back and still center ourselves on where we're at with academic outcomes. I will not shy away from where we're at This information was presented by Executive Director Hunter at the last board meeting. And before I move forward in what we're planning to do, I still want to again address where we stand as a district. So at some Minneapolis sites, there's a gap in academic outcomes of over 40 percentage points that exist between white students and students of color. At some sites, less than 10% of students of color, specifically American Indian and African American students, are proficient in literacy and/or math. Academic outcomes specifically of students of color were declining before the pandemic, and interrupted learning exacerbated the decline. And while Minneapolis trends mirror national trends, the outcomes for Minneapolis students of color, specifically American Indian, African American, and Latin American, must be addressed. This means change. We must change, and change is not always easy. So I wanted to highlight a few things that we had already put into place this year, and I think I'm not going to read through everything because it's in the slide deck, but it's really specific detailed information that I believe the board and the public should be watching in terms of when we're making commitments and promises, and when we're sitting up here saying this is what we're going to do. I want to bring you along in the journey to show you where are we at. Obviously, we're not at our final destination. We're in October, so our second month of school, but we have made some progress since I sat before you in August. So for letters, that has been something many people have been interested in. We have 80 out of our 80 licenses filled by administrators. 48% have completed the intro, and at the time that we posted this board deck, 35% have begun working on the 8 units. And again, I want to stress that these are very time-intensive and work-intensive. It is not something you can sit and multitask and do. It's not something you can sit while you're monitoring students at lunch. This is a commitment by our administrators to take the time to be fully dedicated through the training. But it is very promising that we have administrators that are already starting to work through the 8 units past the introductory training that we had in August. We also have letters for our K-2 teachers. That's a different training than what the administrators are getting. So at this time, well, let me back up. At the time that we pulled this, 69 out of 120 licenses were filled out of the K-2 teachers. And please remember that we had offered first to the 8 designated schools that had shown on their spring 2022 FAST that the school was high need in terms of literacy. So we wanted those schools to have first chance at the licenses, the K-2 teachers. And the schools are listed there on the slide. So at the time, we had 69 out of the 120 licenses that were filled. So then we opened up the remaining 51 licenses to 3 additional schools, which are listed there. And then we're now at 87 out of the 120 K through 2 teacher licenses spots filled. So now we have opened it up to all schools. So now we have teachers from all schools opting into this. And please remember, again, for teachers, this is very time intensive. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of learning, and we do provide teachers stipends for completing this work because of the extra time that they take in it. We also have training for our K-2 TOSAs. As many of you know, we have K-2 TOSAs as coaches in our elementary buildings, and so we wanted them, of course, to have the same training. So they're receiving that either through MDE, the letters cohort MDE, or they're through our Minneapolis training cohort. For Groves, some of you have been in schools where Groves has been happening. I know Superintendent Cox and some other people were in some schools this past week maybe, and they were seeing Groves in action just to get a better idea of what this actually means. We say Groves a lot, but taking a look and meeting teachers and watching the instruction happening. So those schools up on the screen are ones that are receiving the coaching. They will be provided report card guidance to the families about what the students are receiving and their progress. And we are also completing learning walks in the Grove schools with our content leads and then with Grove staff just to keep monitoring how that's going. I shared before, and I want to bring it back into focus, that we did identify some sites to have the option. We did identify some sites to have functional phonics. Now, this is a specific phonics curriculum, and the sites that were identified, again, were identified based on their literacy scores in the spring. And so this training has now begun for teachers. It's a very detailed and intense way of teaching phonics, but we do believe that our schools that have the highest need in literacy based on their FAST scores need this training. And our coaching sessions have already begun in September. Also, press is continuing going. I've mentioned that before, but I wanted you to just have an update on press. Again, all of our schools have access to press. We started first with our title schools last year, and now we've brought in the rest of the schools. This is really your intervention system, our Tier 2 intervention for literacy. They're working through training staff and principals on using a decision tree. So if a student scores right here, then what do you do next? Then what do you do next? Then how do you monitor that? So again, that is in-depth training as well, but we just had our second, I think, training with principals this last few weeks. For literacy for 6-12 in middle school, we do have reading teachers allocated to our grade 6-8. Our reading teachers have begun training in STARI, which stands for Strategic Adolescent Reading Intervention. These teachers are trained in this adolescent reading intervention program and will be using it with their students. There's also co-teaching teams working with our multilingual learners who are, based on assessment, are placed into these reading intervention classes in middle school. In high school, we currently have had our secondary literacy teams walking through high schools, observing ELI classrooms in collaboration with administrators, teacher leaders, and any literacy specialists at those buildings. I've heard really positive remarks about what they're seeing in the classrooms and the support that the staff have been asking for, very detailed support, and so that is the best way then we can serve them, is when we know where the actual need is. Best practices, they're seeing best practices in action, reflection, classroom instruction, application, and we will be soon releasing observation tools for administrators to use as they go into the classrooms, depending on grade level and depending on content. So that should help focus observation and feedback so that there can be that opportunity for a conversation and coaching if needed. And for our math, you all should know that we adopted a new math curriculum for K-5. So again, I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but you'll see that we are working through our PD sessions. Remember, we did a big launch in August, but instead of throwing everything at teachers at once and say, bye, have a good year, we did just the introductory in August, and then now there's unit training as teachers get to those units. So I'm in Unit 1, I just got that training, that's what I can hold in my brain, and that's what I can implement. Now I'm ready for Unit 2, I can go through Unit 2 training, reflect how Unit 1 went, and then move on. So it's not a big, here's everything, now remember by May what you're supposed to do in Unit 6, right? But we're gonna take it a step at a time. And then administrators also have the access to Bridges and Number Corner training as well. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but these are additional supports that we currently have in our buildings. Again, I'm wanting to spend time on what we're currently doing because these are all aligned to our strategic plan, and I want to make sure that we know that as we move forward, knowing the academic outcomes of our students, we're going to continue on this path, what's in the strategic outcome, but that we're going to add some boost to these areas, right? So I wanted to just highlight some of the things that are happening from our external providers that are in our schools, supporting students academically, socially, emotionally, and through engagement. So we have Reading Corps, Beacon, and then of course our community ed program that brings in a lot of external community partners to support students after school. We also have these partners at our middle and high school, and then of course we advertise and we promote a lot free community-based programs that students can take part of after school or on the weekends when our schools are not necessarily open. So the strategic plan, I just mentioned this, so I got a little ahead of myself, but the strategic plan is the roadmap to address the learning loss and will continue to be the focus. So again, these are the 4 areas of the strategic plan. I would say that, you know, often I'm asked, well, what's the 5th area to address learning loss? And I'd say if we stay the course on these 4 and we boost in these 4, we will see change, right? We don't have to add a 5th. We don't have to add something shiny that requires us to divert the attention and the resources that we've already agreed to in the strategic plan. We do know that we need to strengthen core instruction through content knowledge, cognitive science, and culturally responsive instructional practices. And then we also know that because we have the assessments, the information on our students now from September and October, there are certain areas that we need to now boost, which means we need to provide a little bit extra, but we're not going to stray from the strategies that we have in the strategic plan. So these, I realize I'm talking really fast. I apologize to the interpreters. These 3 areas are additional time for student learning, explicit intervention strategy, and staff training. So the first is additional time for student learning. So we have in our school calendar for students some time where they can come into our buildings, they can make use maybe even in their home through asynchronous models, additional time for learning. So those natural breaks would be during winter break, spring break, and then continuing with our extended summer programming. We had a lot more students participate in our summer programming, and we did see that there was less of a slide based on the number of students that were participating in summer programming. So we want to make sure we're continuing that and allocating resources and recruiting staff to keep that going this summer. One thing I'd like to introduce, and I do want to explain what I mean, is the high dosage tutoring, because now that's become a little cliche and everyone's using it in the educational world. But what we would like to do here in Minneapolis Public Schools is have a high dosage tutoring program available as an option for schools that would like to partake. Now, the difference between high dosage tutoring and regular tutoring perhaps, sometimes regular tutoring is like homework help. Like, come to me, bring your assignment, I'll sit and walk you through it. The high dosage tutoring is very intensive. The tutors are going through an explicit either reading intervention curriculum, a math intervention curriculum, and for it to be high dosage, you have to be in one-on-one, small group, and at least 3 times a week. So that's different than just stopping in after school, right, to your library and having someone sit down and help you with homework. The research says that if you do this, you have licensed instructors or people highly trained in these 2 areas, reading and math, and the students are in small groups and they get it 3 times a week, that their academic outcomes exponentially increase. So we would like to be able to offer that here in Minneapolis Public Schools as an option for schools that see that as a best fit for them as addressing some of their academic outcomes. So we have released RFP, Request for Proposal. It is live on our site, so vendors are able to go in and apply if this is what they offer as a vendor. And the bulleted points are highlights of things that they must have in order to apply and for the or send in a proposal. And I wanted to add also, it's not, I didn't notice it on there, but one of the pieces that we are also asking are for bilingual and multilingual tutors. That was also included in the RFP. I just must have gotten cut off the slide. I apologize. Another boost is providing additional assessments in elementary literacy. So what we're seeing is for teachers and educators who consistently assess their students, whether it's like an actual formal test or if it's more of a formative test, they get more up-to-date information on their students, and then they're able to either intervene or accelerate based on what they need to do. The other thing I've highlighted frequently at these board meetings is that we do need to improve the core instruction, level 1, the instruction that all students get. 1 is content knowledge, 2 is instructional practice, and in order to understand where students are at in content knowledge and instructional practice, we have, with Benchmark Advance, that's our current literacy curriculum, interim and unit assessments. So these are available for teachers to use, and they're good places to understand where students are at in core instruction, in the classroom, and then to go through the decision tree that I just mentioned before that we're doing with press, et cetera. So we've opened that up, and we've also provided district-level support to schools that would like to channel their energy in providing more assessments to students. And again, these are not, you know, the bubble kind of tests, right? These are interim unit assessments that some are one-on-one with students, some are more just capturing where the students are at. But it's better to identify early if students are not tracking versus waiting all the way to the end of the quarter and being like, oh, now we have to do something more serious with the student. And the next one is staff training. So we have been I was going to say frantically, but that is actually true. We have been frantically working on putting together packages for our schools for the grade level teams. So here's what you could do week 1, week 2, week 3. Here's an assessment you can give. Here's some conversation starters. Here's what you should do if you have a student that's not showing this improvement or that improvement, just so that we have a guide available for students. So if you have a brand new grade level team or teachers from a different district that haven't used Benchmark or Press or anything, that they actually have a guide to work through with their grade level teams. So we're putting those together for literacy and math. Like I said, we are pursuing additional seats for letters training if we max out that number that I stated before. We still have open seats, so we're not going to purchase more licenses till we fill our current seats. And then additional opportunities for sites who choose to implement functional phonics. So we've had some principals reach out and say, you know what, our teachers would really like to have a phonics curriculum. So we're opening that up past those 4 sites that we had provided initially. And then we have, we're in development of a professional development learning suite, one for administrators, one for our teachers, and then we'll have one available to our families and caregivers. So I know it's a lot, but I wanted to make sure you saw what we were already doing based on the strategic plan, and then some things that we're putting in, we're boosting, and we're working pretty fast on getting those boosts up and ready, and for our schools to take part if that's what they need for their students.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. For the final portion of our report, I'll ask Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives, Sarah Hunter, to provide an update on our strategic plan. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Ellison, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Cox, student representatives, and members of the community. So I'm happy to share our sort of, at this point, most comprehensive update thus far for the strategic plan, but I'm going to do it in brief bullet points so that I'm not reading all the slides. So the first thing that I wanted to share is we will be sharing with you, with our community at the November regular board meeting, our fall FAST data. So we're pulling together the last pieces of that this week, and I think I am hopeful that you feel positive as we've seen some early pieces of that data, and we're making progress, in some areas that we really need to be for students. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you next month. The other thing that I did want to share is there's some connections to some of the work that Dr. Fearing just shared that I'll share. Our teams are working in collaboration with one another, and I think it's important that as we sit up here presenting to you together that we share those connections. So Amy had offered access to our team for letters training, so we are taking up that option. So the school improvement team is also getting training in letters, so that as we're partnering across our departments, we can make sure that school leaders are getting what they need.
Excuse me, just a minute. We're hearing that the talking in the audience is disrupting others who are trying to listen to our meeting. So if we could quiet down a little bit or step out if you need to talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. All right, so what I'm going to walk through for the strategic plan is each of the conditions. So each of the 4 goal areas has a series of conditions that were defined as like the things that need to be in place before our strategies can have their greatest impact. And what we've done is, so the format that you'll see is we have the conditions on the left, and then the middle is really like ideal state, what we need to be true. And then the right side is where are we at right now. So I'm going to highlight a couple things from this slide. So this is condition 1. All schools follow an academic schedule and calendar that supports our academic priorities. So we do have scheduling guidelines. We do check in with schools to make sure that they are in alignment with those pieces so that we make sure students are getting access to what they need. The piece that we're really working on now that I want to highlight, and this is under Amy Fearing's leadership, is that creation of clearly articulated core content from K to 8 so that students are prepared when we move them out into high school, right? So making sure that like what you're learning in mathematics in 3rd grade transitions to 4th in an effective manner, right, and on, and then in each content area. So we'll be sharing updates on that as it progresses. And then the second condition on this slide is related to being staffed appropriately. So we are currently at an 8% vacancy rate for licensed staff, and at the time when we shared this update, so that might be updated between last week and this week, and 10% is the national average at this time. But we don't want to just look at vacancy rates. We also want to be looking at retention. So what we want to be true is that we are at 90% retention for school-based staff. We're there in most areas, but I believe our ESP staff is where we're below that mark, and that's the group that we'd like to increase retention for. So we've talked a lot about professional development, right? And Dr. Fearing has spoke about all of this that's like embedded in the school year, right? So a good example is that math PD that's each unit. we've built time into the school year, so that's a success. The piece that's sort of next that I think is going to be our key lever is making sure that the professional learning communities that are where teachers are really learning on an ongoing basis weekly, that they are occurring across the district, so that then we make sure that the content that we're providing in partnership with Amy's departments, it really has a home in each school. And then we're working towards, because of the fact that we have a new math curriculum, all teachers are using that K-5. We're auditing the literacy curriculum. You've heard about that. But the highlight here for me, particularly given that we have assessment data that is available to us and we'll be presenting next month, is the use of decision trees. So the fact that we have created decision trees for literacy and math, and our ideal is that all teachers are using them. So that's some of the work that we're doing in partnership moving forward. So we make sure that if a student, say, tested below grade level, they are getting that next step that is a diagnostic. Following the diagnostic, the teacher is working to implement differentiated instruction for that student. And then this condition relates to stronger systems of accountability for any staff that are not performing where we need them to be for students. So one of the things that we would like to be true is that we increase the degree to which our standards of effective instruction, so that's what we use to evaluate teachers, and then standards of effective school leadership that we use for administrators, increase the degree to which that's being used as an accountability measure in terms of both at the training level and then in schools to make sure we have supports in place for staff that aren't meeting students' needs. So now I'm transitioning to goal 2. So goal 2 is student well-being. The first condition is related to student mental health. So I'll just sort of echo what Interim Superintendent Cox talked about a little bit in her intro, that we are, we're seeing a need for students to receive support. And right now we are at one FTE that is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. So we're looking to increase that such that we have more than one. I met him yesterday. He's lovely, but he's doing the job by himself. And then in sort of similar to that, increasing our mental health support specialists such that every school has an assigned staff member. Right now we have 6, so they're spread out pretty thin across the district. But a win is that all MPS sites do have access to Tier 1 through 3 school-based mental health services. So that's the case right now. And then in terms of building out our mental health professionals as moving forward, we're currently working on creating a staffing plan that prioritizes candidates and agencies that represent our students and our staff and our community. So increasing the degree to which the folks who we do hire represent our students. All right, so the next one is related to an SEL curriculum. So right now we have multiple social emotional learning curriculums in use in MPS, and Derek Francis's team is working with folks in core content and then some consultants from Castle that we work with, and then partnering with the mental health team as well to make sure that the resources that we're looking at supporting schools in purchasing or funding at the system level match up with all of what those folks need to be in front of students from a social emotional learning perspective. And then at the secondary level, we need to build out access for all students to receive SEL instruction, and that will likely look like like a foundational block at the beginning of the day. I've lost the word for advisory time. And then, so staffing, as we all know, we're in a difficult staffing market right now. So we'll just acknowledge that right now we do have vacant positions in these 3 areas that we need to be able to address, but we're in a market that makes that very difficult. So in plant operations, we currently have an 18.5% vacancy rate. Culinary and wellness services has a 32% vacancy rate, and transportation is at a 30% vacancy rate. So that's us sharing where we're at right now, and I'm hoping to be able to share it would be great if the market shifted a bit, but that's where we're at right now. And then this next one is about a restorative practices plan. So one of the things that we believe is really important is that all staff have some form of training in restorative practices, since all staff interact in ways that may create situations where restoring needs to happen. So right now, we are currently at 6 schools participating in a cohort model through Legal Rights Center. And then our Equity and School Climate Department is in training with Legal Rights Center as well. But our ideal state is that we move to all staff having access to some form of that training. We also don't yet have a hate and bias protocol that's been finalized and shared out, so that's another step that's being worked on. And then I'll move to youth enrichment programming. So I actually have a positive thing to share that is different from what's on this slide. So as of last Tuesday, we were at programming at 41 out of 51 of our elementary and middle schools. We are now at, so of those 10 sites that didn't have programming, we're down to 3. So only 3 don't have a program that's going to be up and running. And a lot of that has to do with not having staff who are able to commit that additional time to if you're working additional hours after the school day. So we're working currently, we had a conversation this week about how to support those 3 sites that don't yet have ALC or extended day programming. All right, so goal 3, effective staff. One of the things that I think is a success over the last number of years is the pathway programs that we've created. But what I want to acknowledge here, so that's our Grow Your Own programs. This year, our capacity, or what we're currently able to do, is we are developing 16 licensed educators. When we look at the number of educators who we need to be building, through our pipeline, we want to be able to increase the degree to which we want to increase our capacity. And one of the things that I think was important to share from our HR perspective is that we'd really like to be able to fund those pathway programs not out of grant funding that's short-term, right? So being able to make that long-term financial commitment that this is something we just do in Minneapolis. And you're going to hear me say that for a couple other things too. And then the next area, so wanting to make sure we have competitive wage and benefits packages. Right now, we don't have the flexibility to adjust as the market changes, right? Because once you've negotiated a contract, that's where you're at for the duration of the contract. So as our market is changing really, really rapidly, it makes it difficult for us to adjust quickly. And so this is sort of the opposite of we want to have enough vacancies. So this is sort of counter to, right? We want to make sure we have vacancies so that we can bring in highly valued staff of color to again increase the degree to which we have teachers and educators who look like our students. This is not a problem right now. So when we were in our conversations about how to share with you about this goal, we have sufficient vacancies right now. So we wanted to talk about the strategies we're using to make sure we have folks who can then, move into the system. So our pathway programs are a really good, strong tool. We'd also like to be able to predict staffing better, so that then when we're trying to recruit folks of color from either inside of our state, or we go out externally to try to recruit folks, sometimes you're able to say, so this is what our HR department was saying, right? You'd say, there are positions, but we don't know where yet because of the fact that our process takes time in the spring, right? So we want to be able to have a better way of predicting staffing openings, so we can say it's this school, you're not going to be the only staff person of color in this school, right? And here are the supports that we're going to make sure that we provide for you, which is that last bullet point. Often what we hear is that there's a lack of outside of the school day support structures in place for folks who move from out of state to join our system. And we want to really be able to have systems in place that support connections to the community, et cetera. And then our last effective staff conditions update is related to positive organizational climate. If you think about wanting staff to be effective, we need to have an organizational climate that makes you want to work here, right? That makes you want to be a part of our system and stay. So we'll know that that's true when we increase retention for both students and staff. And a lot of the work related to climate is in Goal 4. So I'm going to hold until Goal 4. So goal 4 is related to school and district climate. The first thing was related to site council, so making sure that we're implementing our site council policy with fidelity. As you all know, because we've been sharing this at several board meetings, we did work with the EDIA on this policy, and we did recommend a revised policy at the policy committee on October 4th. So that's in process. And then, so one of the main things that we found in that, in checking the degree to which it's being implemented as written, is that because we don't have a system for gathering that data on a regular basis, and some of that, the most important data being whether or not site councils are representative of their school community, we don't have a good way of then following up and saying, how can we help you, right? Like, you're the subset of schools that aren't, haven't made this happen yet. So that's in process right now. Several of us who are here tonight, including Senior Officer Harrisberry, is working on this with us in terms of what would that look like, what do we need from school leaders, how are we going to gather that data from site councils over time so that we're checking our increase in matching up with what the policy states. And then us associate superintendents will be reviewing their school's site council practices to make sure that we're in alignment with the policy. And then equity competencies are something that we've had for years. We were in the process of editing them last year, and then the goal is to be using the new equity competencies to make edits to the both standards of effective instruction and of school leadership. And under Derek Francis's leadership, the final revision will be happening this school year in order to, again, move forward towards using them in our the processes that we use to check to whether or not teachers have what they need and the support that they need in order to meet students' needs from an equity perspective. This first one, the data looks a little different. So the full implementation of the student placement EDIA was one of the areas we need to be true in order for school climate to be increasing. And so what I would offer is that this looks very numeric, right? That's because it was my team, because we monitor the EDIAs, and we have a website that has lots of detail related to the student placement EDIA. So right now they are on track. We work closely with the student placement department to check in on the things that we're committed to as a part of an EDIA. And right now, 96% of the short-term action items have been completed. And then of the 29 long-term action items, 66 are in full implementation, 21% are in initial implementation, and then 3% are in installation. 10% are in exploration, and we still have another year to make sure all of those pieces are in place. And what I will do is share that you can Google EDIA website MPS, and you can find all of the details that you would need to check in on what those specific items are. And then this one is near and dear to my heart as well, so continued support and sustainable funding for stakeholder voice structures. So like I had shared in one of the earlier updates, we really want to make sure that our stakeholder voice structures aren't funded with short-term grants. So I'm working in my department to make sure that that is the case for YPE and PPE, so youth participatory evaluation and parent participatory evaluation. One of our wins this year is we're building out site-based PPE from 7 schools that we had it in last year up to 15 schools. And that's a sizable investment in our department, but it means a lot to us to be able to increase the degree to which at the site level we're building that process into school improvement planning, et cetera. And then another area where we integrate community voice is our EDIA committee. So that continues to support full EDIAs like the one that I just spoke about. And then I think the one of the steps that we hear pretty repeatedly is making sure that when we gather youth and caregiver voice that we are then turning it into action. So that's why we still have work to do, right, to prove that we are doing that in the data that we're gathering right now. Site-based PPE is still relatively new. So again, embedding that into our regular structures and systems as a school district so that we do right by what we are gathering from our families and our students. And then the last one, so this is about magnets, and I will share that we've had some conversations about whether this belongs in goal 1. So we'll just say that out loud for all of you. So this one is around K-12 magnet pathways. So we are working, the team is working this year on vision, mission, PD, marketing, et cetera, moving that such that, and I know some of the schools that Tyrese was speaking about earlier are magnets, right? So they're getting some additional support. Our dual language sites have thematic curriculum. Our other sites are working on creating thematic curriculum such that you can see and feel, like Tyrese mentioned earlier, that magnet theme throughout the school day. And then our arts, STEM, and dual language pathways have been developed. Global Studies and Humanities pathway is under development. So that's where we're at right now. And then one of the sort of related areas is making sure that our magnet sites are meeting their integration enrollment targets. So we don't have that data yet for you this year, but we'll be sharing that as we have final enrollment for this year. Okay, I'll hand it back.
Thank you so much, team. Appreciate it. Charleston, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
All right, thank you. Board directors, as you hit your request to speak button, I'm going to start with question and comment from enrollment. First, congratulations, staff, on meeting your projections in the 3 focus schools. I think that is exciting as well. And then on the 15-day drop, do we know why students aren't showing up for those 15 days? Do we do any questioning? Do we reach out to the families, just like when we lose students? I see that as kind of we've lost that student. Do we know why students aren't showing up?
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I can't say that we know with certainty why. There are times when we know that families have applied to several places, and so they are kind of hedging their bets and seeing where they get in. So that's one thing. There are times it's not a, I can't say that we do it with consistency, but there are times that we do reach out to families and say, hey, you did get into this school. But that is not, I can't say that we do that in every case, and that's something that we have on our list to improve.
All right, just wondering. So thank you. Director Arneson?
Thanks, and thank you all for the information here tonight. In particular, I appreciate the specifics that you discussed here with really what you're describing is your implementation steps that you're taking, right, so that we can change the trajectory of our student outcomes. So I appreciate that you went into details about how you're doing that and the link to the resources and the change of that it sounds like we're going to talk about in finance and the conditions that you're trying to put in place to get again to those ultimate student outcomes. So, and I'm hearing that we're really going to talk about talking about student outcomes next month with the FAST data, and I know you referred to many of you referred to it tonight, and we talked about it at the last COW. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about, though, is the kind of the conditions here that we talked here tonight. And so there's no doubt that everything here, all the actions you described, are critical to our ultimate goal. So I'm glad that you're tracking it. I'm glad that you described it. And there's no doubt, I don't have any argument with anybody who is implementing those things. But I'm wondering, we had about 12 or 15 pages or so of information and metrics that you're tracking, and I'm just wondering, in that all that information that you shared, what should the board be following most closely over the coming year or months? In other words, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to track as a board, right? Like, it's unlikely we're going to be able to revisit all of the things you described here tonight. You described about 12 pages of conditions that you're looking for, metrics that you have, that you're monitoring internally, which I understand and appreciate, and I'm glad that you're monitoring those things. But what I'm trying to kind of think about is, what could this board follow? What are a few things? And I know you mentioned last month you have work groups in each of these goals. So what is like one thing in each of these areas that we might follow as a board, as you're also telling us about student achievement? So what are you considering like the priority and really important in each of those goals that we might want to follow more carefully as a board, that implementation success of kind of the adult input, so we can kind of track it towards student output, if that makes sense.
Yes, it absolutely does. And I appreciate the question. So I think, and Amy, feel free to chime in. So I think in one of the things that feels the most important in Goal 1 is the time we're setting aside for teachers to work together and engage in data cycles in PLCs. So I will just name specifically because so many of the other things that Amy described can't happen unless teachers have dedicated time to work with one another. So a good example would be the decision trees, right? Like if we are taking the time to take the FastBridge assessment and then the following diagnostics, you've got to have time to then plan for different instruction. So one of the things I would share you should look forward to, and again, I will say thank you for the question, is next month we will be sharing the degree to which things like PLCs are in place at the start of the school year, and then sharing our plan for supporting sites that may not have them in place yet. So that's something for the board to keep an eye on. Anything else in goal 1, or I'll move to goal 2.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I kind of wanted to just repeat everything on the slides, but knowing you just wanted me to pick one, I can't repeat them all. I think, you know, the conditions, some are very technical, and you can track with percentages, and some are very adaptable, right? So you're really going to be looking at, you know, kind of mindsets, motivations, professional development, et cetera. I think for me, one of the main pieces, a condition that's in place so that we can get to the strategies, is really ramping up our core content knowledge and our cognitive science understanding within the different content areas. And I say that because I think that along with the time that educators will have with each other to share and to work with each other, I think we really do need to focus and provide those opportunities to understand the clear, articulated sequence from K through 8 when you're looking at what does history look like, what does science look like, because again, that is going to have one of the largest impacts on literacy. When your students have the background knowledge, they have the content to be able to understand what they're reading, that's going to have a twofold impact on that first strategy, which has to do with literacy and math. So that would be my knee-jerk response to the question about goal 1.
All right, I had a second to think about goals 2 through 4. So I would say a place where you all have a lot, you spend a lot of your time in fall through winter and then all the way to June is in budget. So I think if you're looking at goal 2, one of the things that I would highlight is, are we, as we present a budget to you, are you seeing the things that I named, right? So are we increasing our mental health allocation? Are we specifically looking at the areas that were called out in the conditions? That would be my suggestion for goal 2. I think looking at goal 3, it's maybe similar. If we say that our pathway program is a way that we increase, right, our degree to which we can hire, recruit and retain staff of color, then are we putting our money where our mouth is, right? Like, is that something we're really committing to? And then in goal 4, I have it close to my heart, but I'm going to say we're going to make sure that we integrate youth and caregiver voice. So you're going to hear that anyway. So it's not necessarily something you need to keep your eye on. I would expect that you continue to hear us bringing other voices to the table. I think we're modeling that in the way that we're presenting Committee of the Whole to you this year. But I think the ensuring that our pathways, right, so K through 12 pathways that get folks wanting to be a part of our system, wanting to hear from us what that looks like, might be something I would focus on in goal 4.
Okay, thank you. So,
Would you mind if I add one more
go
thing?
ahead.
You know, I think, we always talk about ourselves, thanks to Dr. Fearing, as a learning organization. And I think we're learning how to do a strategic plan. I'll be honest with you, I've been in the district for many years, and to keep focus on it is one that we're trying to be very disciplined about. But I think as we move into these next months, you'll also see us starting to figure out what needs to be prioritized and what has to come before other things. So it's my job to help provide this amazing group and this amazing team at both of our tables with that idea of, like, how do we stay focused? Because, we were with our principals yesterday, and yesterday was Monday, yes. And it was, it was like, wow, we have a lot on our plate. And how do you help us stay focused? And what can stay on, what can go off? And if not, how do we prioritize those things? So when you see the optional boost that we talked about today, it's important that it is optional right now, because we know for some schools, they need to really push on certain things that might not be the things that we're bringing to the table here. So I think you'll see from us as we start to prioritize things, we'll start to make sure that we're requiring things in certain places, but other things we can kind of say, we can put that one on the back burner as we move forward. So I think we're learning about the strategic plan also, which is exciting, but also a little, as we go, being able to call ourselves learning through it and not always having the perfect answer, which I appreciate for all of you.
Likewise, I appreciate this discussion. And I think one way, as I think about kind of my time on the board or just kind of our history and learning together the strategic plan, I think one way the board can be helpful in a strategic plan is focusing our discussion on the things that matter the most to you, and this board time is a resource in itself. So the time we spend here together, right, can be helpful in advancing whatever you want to advance. And so if we can, and what I know kind of over the years is it's really easy. So in no way am I suggesting that we should not do any of these, like all of the things, no doubt, right? Like no doubt that in the background you're doing a million things and other things that come up that you have to do that may or may not be related to your strategic plan. But one thing I think that we can do as a board is choose a few things, focus on them, and talk about them from month to month. So if that is, telling us every month how you're doing in implementing your PLC, and hearing that you feel whatever percentage or however you're tracking that, that's a really good thing for our board to be spending time on if you're telling us that you believe that that's critically important to student success. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do those other 12 things, or 12 pages, I should say, of things, right? But we don't have time realistically, probably, to get into depth. And what I do notice from over the years, it's really easy for boards, for staff, for everyone to kind of shift to whatever they're working on at the moment because it's top of mind. But then we shift focus, and then it's, we come back a year later and we're still like kind of in the same place. And some of the things, quite frankly, if we're being honest, what you named on the conditions are multi-year projects, right? So we want to continue to do those as well, but some of them we're going to be moving along faster than others. But I think that, so what I'm hearing you say is PLC implementation, if we chose to focus on something as a board or renew, I guess, some themes and conversation I'm hearing, and it's okay if you change your mind, right, because you were on the spot, but I heard PLC implementation is going to be useful, tracking that core content knowledge, that's really important to you. I'm hearing tracking the dollars, where we're putting the investment, and not only, and that's starting, and that might be through finance, might be here as well, and then talking about our K-12 pathways and making sure that they're in place. And that could be really, if we focus on that as a board, that can perhaps advance our strategic plan and get us closer to our ultimate goal, which is fundamental math and literacy knowledge for our students across the board. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Director Caprini.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I guess if you had asked me like 5, 6, 7 years ago, to explain the strategic plan, I would be like, I don't know. But this is so well articulated and laid out. It literally goes step by step. And I say this because if I were a parent of a kindergartner and had the opportunity to go through this presentation, I would have a great foundation to work with, not knowing anything about all of the stuff that happens in here or how schools actually function. And so I really appreciate how it's been pulled together. These are all of the things that everybody's been asking for forever. The problem is that we get unfocused and we focus on 1 or 2 things. And it just gets to be too noisy and we're not able to get the work done. So this is really well written and thoughtful and thought out. I'll stop there because that wasn't even part of what I wanted to say, but I just had to spell that out quickly. So of the schools that were focus schools, you talked about the projected numbers and that you had 7 seats. So I'm going to just name 2 schools just out of curiosity. So Bethune and Hall would be one of those, or 2 of those schools, correct?
Correct.
And so, because I work at Phyllis Wheatley, and so I see the bus line, and it literally can go around the block sometimes. So I know that enrollment has increased tremendously. And I hear them in the hallways, because my office is right there at the courtyard. So I can hear them at lunch and in the gym, and it's just amazing. That's one of my favorite parts of the day. What was the projected number, and what is the what's the capacity of both schools?
Director Caprini, thank you for that question. Unfortunately, I don't know that I have that in this moment, But I think maybe if you give me a few minutes, by the time we get through some of the other questions, I may be able to get
Okay.
that from some of my colleagues.
I'm not quite done yet, but I'm done with that part.
All right.
Could I just interject? I think it's a great question and one that is challenging to answer, and a question that I have, because I think what we need to understand for each of our schools is, what their current enrollment is. We need to understand what the market share is across, of all the students in that area for our community schools. And then we need to understand actually what our buildings can hold. Because, I think all of us educators, and I hold myself in the same space, we have an incredible skill and gift of being able to expand in any area we're given. So we have to really go school by school, I believe, and say, what are we committing to? Are you a 3-class grade level, each grade level school? Are you 4? What is the room for the fifth graders that were, is under current construction? Here's a future site for our fifth graders. So we need to have those honest conversations with our schools, our school leaders, our teachers, and our community for each school to understand where we're at as we move forward. And so that's a project that I really want to work on this year. So we have that set up for the new superintendent coming in. So we have a clear idea across where we can expect growth and where we can't. So more to come on that too, with what Tyrese was saying. So thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your answer. Appreciate it a lot. The other quick question, first another compliment. The websites, super happy to hear that the websites are being, they're being paid more attention to. I can't tell you how frustrating it was to go to a website and just pick one randomly and say, no school, no school, no school on the calendar. When I know for a fact there is school, there's school, there's school, and there's something happening in that building. So and I've actually kind of looked around at a few different websites. So I'm really impressed with the work that's happening with the websites. That's awesome. The other couple things is restorative practices here at the Davis Center. Are those practices being practiced here for staff here at the Davis Center? And then I have one tiny more comment and then I'm done.
I appreciate the question, Director Caprini. Training is happening for staff at the Davis Center in terms of the Equity and School Climate team. I think to be very honest, that the training, training, yes, right. I would say all of us as a system, like climate is of course something that is present in each building, including the Davis Center, right? So if that's sort of what you're asking related to, restoring relationships, et cetera, I think one thing that I could share that I think Derek Francis would want me to share is that there's a really intentional effort by he and his team in partnership with Interim Superintendent Cox to rebuild community in this building in a way that at least I, like as a staff person, so this is not my work, like I'm seeing a positive impact, just the way in which folks are interacting with one another under Interim Superintendent Cox's leadership is restoring some relationships that may have been strained from like not being present in spaces together. So just a really good example of restoration of sharing space and like getting to know who even works in this building is our first Davis Center staff meeting that I think Interim Superintendent Cox shared about. It was here, but it was out in the cafe area, right? And folks were able to interact with one another in a way that was meaningful to me as a staff member, and I think that's one step towards improving climate here at Davis, which is related to restoring of relationships with one another such that we can support schools in a way that's positive and productive.
And I thank you for that answer because I know it. I just think it's important for the public to hear it because what does happen here does directly affect, trickles into our buildings. And the last thing is you mentioned the licensed alcohol drug counselors. This is just, I don't know, maybe you've already thought of it, and I'm sure you probably have, partnering with some of these other organizations. And the first one that came to my mind, and I don't know if they have a youth program, Turning Point. Can we find the funds somewhere? We're making friends with a lot of different corporate, companies, and they ask what we need. This is what we need. So who are those organizations that we can partner with that can actually come into our buildings and support students that are struggling with drugs and alcohol?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Director Booker.
Great presentation. Thanks a lot for the information. I only have a couple of questions. You mentioned, so vacancies are happening everywhere, right? Within every organization. So, of course, Minneapolis Public Schools can't be any different. But I was wondering, how do those vacancies, how will that impact student success? And how will that impact the great information you shared with us tonight? And thirdly, how will that impact budgeted?
I can start. It's a challenge.
It's
And it
complicated.
does impact everything. I think our school leaders, our teachers are doing heroic efforts to meet the needs of students. And I think that adds to the fatigue and the ability to limit our endurance, because this is a year-long work that we're going to be doing, and it's tough. So the more that we can continue to continue all our efforts, we can't be like, okay, we're done recruiting now. Like, we have to just keep going and building and building and building. And I think that happens in a couple ways, right? It's our recruitment efforts that we reach out, but it's the retention efforts. It's showing what an amazing community and student body we have, and actually have a school district system that people want to work in. So to me, it's all the climate work. It's all people hopefully tuning into our board meetings and being like, look, they're actually working on these things. Or I'm really interested in having the idea of having interventions that are available to me. I want that letters training. And wow, Minneapolis is doing that. So the more we can speak about that into our community and out there at other, like one thing I've learned as being an interim superintendent is the superintendent world is very, very tight. They reach out, and I feel very connected to them. So while I don't want to publicly say that I'd like to steal all the good teachers from all the districts around me, you're welcome to come here. We have amazing staff. You will have amazing colleagues, amazing students to work with. But really, I think it's about that too. It's about building up our reputation, as well as providing that recruitment and thinking outside the box with that recruitment too. So yeah, lots of work to do there.
So then my follow-up, it's more of a statement. I think that, as you guys prioritize and you bring updates, I think it's important to share, some of the difficulties that was surrounding it. It's not so much, I think, sometimes that we're not good at or we don't know what we're going to do. It's just that other indicators impact it. And I think that these goals are measurable. And I think that also, these goals can really illustrate the growth and the opportunities and, some of the barriers that we were facing as we were getting there. So thanks a lot for your work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Director El-Amin.
Thank you, Chair and the team, for the information. A lot of information today. Definitely an abundance of information, trying to understand, keep track of everything that's going on. Several questions that I have around the information that was being presented. One being the state of emergency that we're in when it comes to our Black and brown children, when it comes to the academics, where our children are reading at, where we're staying stagnated at with science, and where math is not showing any progression. Why are we, or what is the better way? We have a number of trainings, professional training that we're allowing our teachers, but it's more optional. It seems to me like this needs to be something that's required in order to help us to continue on the path that we're trying to get at with bringing our academics up, with making sure our children are prepared for life outside of high school. So that's my first question. One, to me, it appears like we need to put a little more urgency to the training that our staff and what's taking place for our children to be able to succeed. And then the second is being we talked about our stakeholders coming in and the EDIA being a way that they can use their voices. How does one in the community even know about the EDIA? What are we doing to show them, to let them know that this is an opportunity for them to lean into? And then I know I asked a question prior to Superintendent now about our stakeholders. have we reached out to them to find out what are the resources that they need in order for them to actively be in our community and letting our community or keeping our community informed of how to be involved. I'll stop with those few questions right there for one.
You know, and Amy, I'll let you talk a little bit about the professional development and requiring it. I think you're absolutely right, and I think we need to work with the scientists and the researchers behind some of these very detailed science of reading pieces. The courses are very intensive. I actually have participated in the letters reading course myself just because I needed to know what I was asking teachers to do when I was an associate superintendent. So we have to figure out a way to provide that to our teachers in a way that they don't have to use their time after school and their evening. We want our teachers to have that time with their families as well, and we have to balance that with instructional time for students. And I think when we talk about being a learning organization, I'm still working on figuring out what that balance looks like and how can we get creative about continuing instruction throughout a day, but providing professional development opportunities integrated in the time that teachers are actually working for us. So I think it's a great question. And Amy, unless you've solved that in the last 24 hours since we spoke last, maybe some other ideas of how you guys are addressing that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That is a constant tension between, you know, the list of items that we have that we want everyone to have training on and to see the light and fully implement in a few years, and then to just look at basic calendars and look at what educators, especially teachers, are being asked to do each and every day. So I think there's a constant tension between that. One thing I would say, though, that this year, when we launched the letters training, it actually first came from MDE. So we had staff sign up through MDE first before we offered the Minneapolis cohort. And the one thing that I actually noticed increased, I don't know if it increased the urgency, but I will say increased the interest, was when administrators and teachers were taking it and were sharing it with their colleagues. Like, oh my word, I wasn't quite sure about this, but I just joined it. Thought I'd, learn a few things, and they're, blown away by what they are learning about the science of reading. And so I think that's one thing, I should not say but we could dictate and say, let's do everything, and let's require everything, and let's make sure everybody's taking it. But that doesn't necessarily change practice either. So what we want to do is make sure that what Interim Superintendent Cox is saying is we find that balance between this is definitely an urgent matter. Here's what we're provided. You pick what's best for you as an educator that will help you move from point A to point B. I think having staff have the time during the school day in their PLCs, that also starts to ask the question of what else do I need to know to be able to reach the students that are actually part of our school improvement plan, that are actually part of our PLC goal, because it is very detailed down to subgroups. So I would say, to kind of capture my thoughts, and I'm kind of thinking on the fly, but we could come out as a district and say, here are the 20 different things everybody has to do by, December. Or we can get the momentum, we can work with our educators, show them that here are all the different options, some of you here, some of you are here, here's what I need you to do. But I also believe that at the end of the day, if outcomes aren't changing, we might have to get to a point where it's like, yeah, you got to do it. But we're at the stage right now where, for literacy especially, MD offered it, then we offered it, we're filling the seats, we will open more seats if we need to. And the moment that we opened it to all schools past those 11, 12 schools that we initially did it, we had so many emails from principals saying, sign this teacher up, sign this teacher up. And that's not because I went to the school and sold it, that's because they had colleagues telling them about it and they were just kind of waiting quietly in line for us to open that up. And that personally, and I'm sure people might disagree, but personally that's how I feel like we'll get best implementation, is when an educator has decided this is what they need, they're fully invested in it, they signed up for it, we're providing the support. If they need time, we'll provide the time for them to do it. That's where I see the impact on implementation versus here everybody has to do it by December. That's my initial thought. Director El-Amin, I would like to think about that a little bit more and perhaps provide a more thoughtful response, maybe in a board update or a little bit later.
Yeah, I would just add to Amy, as someone who's taken it, if we can get our cohort through modules 1 through 4, like they're going to breathe a little sigh of relief, because that's what I did personally. You know, because modules 1 through 4 are very much in the brain research, into the phonics, the systems, the phonological pieces. It's very, 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 very intensive. And I think once you get past that and get into like, okay, now we're going to try these strategies with your kids, now that we understand why we're doing the strategies, that's where I started to see in the groups that I was with and the cohorts and listening to the other teachers from across Minnesota that they really started to pick up steam. So I think once we get them through those first four chapters, I'm hoping that we start to see some momentum build in the district about the course too. So Sarah, do you want to pick up with the EDIA and how stakeholders find out about that?
Absolutely. So I appreciate the question, because I think we'd love feedback on our process this past year. So in terms of recruitment for EDIA membership, this past summer we had 10 of our 20 seats open. So we sent out an email blast to all caregivers within Minneapolis Public Schools that we had an email address for, or contact information, in, I think it was June. And then we had the application process open for a couple months over the summer. My email address was attached to the email that went out to families, so I know that we got a lot of interest, because I got a lot of emails to me then I supported and/or sent to members of the team that support the application process. I think like that's just in terms of like getting to know, you know, whether you have the time and the privilege to be able to spend the time being on the committee, right? So I think we have, through that outreach, we got a higher proportion of current MPS caregivers on the committee this year. It had been predominantly over the years leaders in community orgs, who we still have, right? But I think we were able to increase the degree to which they're current MPS parents, which I think is going to be really valuable in the coming years. But in terms of like knowing that the EDIA happens and that you can track the progress of EDIAs, we have updates on our website. We share regularly with you all, but I would love feedback on how we can make sure that we share more broadly that work is happening and how folks could engage. We do ask EDIA committee members to gather input from their communities as they come and, you know, be a part of the process, but it's something that can always be improved. So any feedback that you all have for us, we'd love to take.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry, was there?
I was just going to say thank you for that information, but I wanted to go back to Dr. Fearing in regards to the training and make sure that it's clear. I'm not saying everyone has to take everything, but I think right now when we have the lowest enrollment, our class sizes are smaller, it's the best time for us to be trying to make sure that we are providing our teachers and whoever needs that training to be able to help our students. Again, I know our teachers are, you know, it's a very trying time and we want to be able to support them, but I also know our class sizes are the smallest that they've ever been. And if there's a perfect time, that time is now to be able to make sure that we get what we need for our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Caprini.
We can also share information about the EDIA ourselves on our own social media platforms, on our perspective pages. So I just wanted to make sure that was something that is said.
Great, thank you. Thank you guys so much. Director Soria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the information. It's a lot to digest, honestly, but I feel that we are definitely taking the right steps and providing the feedback, as you mentioned, Ms. Hunter, is absolutely necessary. Can you elaborate a little bit more on page 13, how General Education Leadership Network will function? And also, how many middle school reading teachers have received this training? And what is that percentage? And going back to, I guess, Director El-Amin's point, and if we have a deadline to meet these goals. And when it comes to high school, if you can also further explain the challenges of literacy at the high school level and elaborate on our plan. And we have a timeline to implement the middle and high school plan as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Director Cerrillo. Thanks for the question. I think I only got 3 questions, so I might ask you to repeat one. But so the General Education Leadership Network, that is what we were using as a resource and as kind of our guiding north point as we're working with adolescent literacy. So they've hosted a few professional developments for our principals, and then also working with our district level staff, going through, because adolescent literacy is very different than elementary literacy, and I think in the past, this is my opinion, but I think in the past we've coupled them together. So you have a student who is still in that word recognition, that decoding phase, but they're in 7th grade. That's different than being in 1st grade in a word recognition phase. And you can't use necessarily the same strategies, the same interventions, because you have a 7th grader and they have an adolescent mind. And so that's why we that's why we chose to work with this General Education Leadership Network. As far as how many reading teachers have been trained, I'm going to have to get our updated numbers because we didn't have all the positions filled at all of our middle schools. So that's going to depend, but if they were a reading teacher, or if they are a current reading teacher in a middle school, they've received training. But I need to go back to our vacancies and look to see which middle schools are still missing a reading teacher. So I'm sorry I don't have that information right now. And then I think your question was about high school challenge in literacy and what's the plan to address that. So we've had some really great conversations. I would say they're pretty, I want to say the word, detailed. They can be quite emotional about where our high schoolers are sitting right now in terms of literacy. It's a difficult conversation to have when you're looking at a high schooler who perhaps, is still in that word recognition phase or just moving out of that, and yet they're being given texts that are, 10th, 11th grade, 12th grade level. It brings up a lot of questions about instruction, past educational access, et cetera. We did have our secondary literacy content lead, Heather Like. So she's been going on learning walks to high schools. Her recent learning walk at a particular high school, she was with the principal, she was with some literacy specialists, and one thing that really came to light is the lack of assessments, right? So you have a 9th grader coming in, but how do you really know where they're at? And then how do the teachers then know how to base their instruction and their text based on the student's literacy level? So one of the conversations we had was about the 9th grade fast track. It's an assessment that 9th graders would take, and I can have Executive Director Hunter say a little bit more about the assessment, but the real point of the assessment is to get literacy data on those students. The next conversation then, which I'm probably opening a can of worms, but what we have had already internally is how do we put in formative assessments for our grades 10, 11, and 12 as well. So it's not like you just take a 9th grade assessment and somehow you're going to be at that literacy level till your 12th grade. But how do we include these continually as students are going through grades 10, 11, 12? And at the learning walk that Heather was at, that was one of the things that was actually asked by the educators was, so they've progressed through 9th grade, what can we give at 10th grade so we know where they're at? The third thing that was really clear, as I understand, was also the ability to provide students intervention or time for them to actually get those skills. If you're at the decoding or word recognition phase as a high school student, sitting and not getting the actual the skills and the training from a licensed teacher on how to actually start to code, you're not just going to pick it up sitting in any class. That has to be very intentional, but done in a way that understands the adolescent mind. When I think about the classes that I had to teach as a teacher, and often I had students that were at that level, it was quite embarrassing for them to go to a class. They knew why they were in the class, they knew who the teacher was, they knew why they were there, and that's really difficult for a 10th grader. Everyone knew what that classroom was, right? So you have to take into account a lot of the social emotional and the engagement piece of working with the student. But at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to teach that student how to read. But we have to understand kind of the context and where that student is at in high school. It's very different than when you're working with a first grader, for example, in reading intervention. So long story short, we were starting with the learning walks. We're also providing look-fors so that as administrators and teams, ILTs or PLCs, for example, are doing classroom observations, they have things to specifically look for, and then there's strategies or things they can do then based on what they see. So for example, if they walk into a classroom and the teacher is reading out loud the whole entire hour, there are going to be questions about that because that would not be best practice in terms of taking the entire hour of 9th grade ELA to read out loud to the students, right? So I think, I'm not saying that happened at the school, I'm just giving that as an example of what they would be observing and then the feedback. As we continue developing our secondary literacy, though, we started with the middle school reading teachers, we started with the secondary intervention for the middle school, and as we're getting into our high schools, it's really understanding where are we at and then what strategically needs to be put into place that's actually going to be that we can build out and build capacity among our high schools, especially with our ELA teachers looking at reading intervention programs and ways that we can bring that into high schools that is, affirming to our students, that isn't, isolating for our students as well. So we're working on it, and I'll continue to give you updates as our secondary content lead is doing that work. Did I get all your questions?
Amy, could I add
sure.
one more thing to that? Because I think you've talked a lot about the reading intervention piece of it, which is really important for our students. But at the same time, when we get to the high school level, they also have to have access to the curriculum and the materials, right? So we can't depend on them to learn how to read in the next month and then be able to access all the content they need for comprehension of the academics that they're doing. So it really is a twofold approach, in my opinion, about the reading intervention, as well as having adaptations and access to materials such as, being able to have our textbooks on tape, right? So kids can listen, having visual notes in different ways. So there's lots of strategies, and, coming from my special education background, and I see our Executive Director of Special Education in the audience, it really is about that idea of universal design for learning, because we need to look at all the areas of access, how to get the information, and then also how to share that the information as we go forward. So I think that'll also be a big design feature as we're looking at revamping what we're doing at the high school level.
Thank you. I do have another question. When it comes to tutoring, and we had this conversation before, why do we believe that online approach will work? Didn't our Black and brown students struggle in online learning especially? I mean, that's a proven fact, right? So also, do all students have access to devices to participate in tutoring? And why tutoring is not in person? I just want to have this clarification and be out loud and clear for a lot of our parents that do have these questions. Thank you.
I can start. So I think there's a couple reasons why we started. And I would say, again, an optional academic boost is not saying that a school couldn't start their own tutoring program in person, or that we could utilize one of our many community organizations that provide that. I think when we were looking for a strategy to use, we were looking at one that took into place one that we could implement with the staffing shortages we have right now. So we know just adding extra allocations to a school at this point, we can't staff them, so that's not really helpful to them. We know that when we look at this, we need people who are really trained to do the curriculum and the intervention. And that takes time, and that takes energy. And so when we think about in-person people to help with this, I think Amy and I envision that as I'm doing the online, let's say my teacher is having reading groups, and one of the reading groups is a group of us are going to visit with the online tutor, that Ms. Caprini here might be a volunteer in the classroom, and she might go with us to keep us engaged in it, help us with any tech issues, give us a lot of encouragement as we're going, but she's not responsible for the curriculum part or the intervention part. So I think we were looking for a strategy as we were looking at this boost that we could put into place with the staffing that we have right now, utilizing our families and our community organizations in a way that helps our students engage in it that we never had before, as well as have all the pieces with that online of the dashboard so a teacher can go back and say, how'd that go at the end of the day, rather than having to check in with 4 volunteers or 4 tutors at the end of the day or have to call the community organization. It also honestly gives us also a way to say, is this really an investment we want to keep going with? Is it really working for kids? And so I need a way to quickly be able to do that as we're helping build a budget for the next school year and the next superintendent. So when I do that handoff, I can say, here's the strategy, here's what happened, here's where we think we are. We got mixed results, or we got really positive results here, or wow, Rochelle really had kind of not a great idea. And so that's okay. We can be nimble to think about that. So Amy, do you have anything to add about that?
That and I would say it's a both and. What we're looking for is a vendor or an organization that can provide the part that we can't, right? So we still would say, and it says very clearly in the research, the best academic outcome you will get is from in-person, having a tutor with you one-on-one or in groups of 3 or less. But we also know the reality is, you know, like we had stated, we still have some schools that don't have after-school programming because we don't have staff, right? So if we said the tutoring program is you go out and find tutors that are there 3 days a week, you know, with the student in a small group, we would just be setting schools up, right? And that's not our or at least that's not what I would envision. So the proposal that we expect to see, and there's a few vendors that are out there already, because I kind of researched, but I haven't contacted them, but that are out there, they provide the both. They provide here's our tutoring management system. They also have training for tutors. So anyone who wants to come in person and be a tutor, they can go through this module, learn how to be a good tutor, you know, and then they have a management system where, you know, the tutors can put in the information, the students they supported, and the administrator would then have access to that to say, oh, yep, the student is staying 3 days a week, this is what they're getting. The vendors that I've also have looked at also actually have intervention curriculum that's aligned to the science of reading. So instead of asking the next door neighbor who's coming in to volunteer to be a tutor to teach a tier 2 intervention to a student versus homework help, their online tutors actually have that training and can do that. Now, again, it doesn't take the place of someone coming in person, and we'd love to have an in-person, but I just know that with staffing capacity and where we're at, we just can't depend on every school having a plethora of in-person tutors. But again, I would like to stress, if there are community orgs and people, you know, in our community that would like to do it, please let us know, because it would be our first choice. But we also wanted to have a both and for schools so that, you know, if they are short support staff or their interventionist, instead of the student just sitting there, well, at least you can be with an online tutor that's doing some reading intervention and to support that. So, and again, it's an option. We might have some schools that say, we have our own thing going, we're good, we don't need it. Okay, but we also probably have some schools that be like, thank you so much for setting this up. You know, all we have to do is go in and register and get started. So both and, but definitely in person would be preferred.
Yeah, and I would just say too that we want to make sure that, of course, our teachers are the best teachers of our students. So making sure that they have opportunities through our after-school learning programming and working with our principals if there are any teachers who want to do that, of course, that's number one. So again, just wanting to make sure, as we talked about before, that our teachers have that ability to not have to feel pressured to do that or can make those choices to be home with their families. We want to honor that too. So that's really a balance that we're trying to get.
The last question that I asked, so all of our students do have access to devices? All of our students do, so that they can benefit from tutoring?
Yeah, we'll look to the side row of our senior officer Justin Hennes can answer and tell us where we're at with our student devices. Thanks, Justin.
Board directors, Superintendent Cox, and everybody here in attendance and watching online. Schools have been working to check out devices to all of our students since the beginning of school. We last checked, and a vast majority of students do have a device assigned to them, and I know some are still continuing to work through that. We do have plenty of devices for every student, and we've also accounted for replacements as needed if they happen to break. So yes, they will have access to the technology that they can leverage to access the online components of a tutoring program, as well as all the other technology resources during the school day.
Thank you. Director Ali?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question that maybe I can ask all of you. I remember back then, sometime 2014, 2013, before I joined the board, there used to be some online tutoring. MBS had contract with some companies outside Minneapolis. What did you guys learn from that?
Thanks for the question. I will admittedly say I was a principal at that time, and I didn't know there was an online tutoring system available because we had a pretty robust tutoring program, specifically at Wellstone. So I'd have to get back to you unless there's someone here, Interim Superintendent Cox, that can answer the question. But I wasn't aware of the tutoring program as a principal. I did not use it, so I can't comment on that.
Maybe then it's worth for you to spend some time and find out why we had the contract with those companies, what did not work, what did work out. Those information, institutional information, is very important before we try to implement new things. Secondly, we have to also make sure, it's easy to say online tutoring than practicality, We have so many families who are not necessarily, they don't have even internet here, and we don't want to drop the ball again, you see? So it's very important that we have to spend time and look for resources here. What can we have in-person tutoring? We have so many teachers. We can give kind of like, our own teachers can work evening to make extra money or whatever the case is. They can work for us, instead of online, and we don't know someone somewhere else. And with this today's technology, we need to be careful. We need to make sure that these children are learning. Many parents are not educated enough to know about what their kids doing. Are they really learning? Are they playing game or so and so? So I think those are very, very important. Every time we look information or resources, we have to look within what I mean to say, within the local community. For example, if you are looking for a school where the students are, say, 25% Latino, for example, 25% of the students are Somali, 25% of the students are native. I'm giving you some examples. You have to look information and resource from Latino community before you try to issue RPF and say that RFP and say we are looking for, all those, nice website, high-level consultancies will be coming and this and that. We have to look resources within, and we are behind when it comes to the tutoring. We have been behind, and I hope now, whatever we learned in the past, we can, it can help us. So that's my 2 cents I'd like to share with you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director El-Amin?
Yeah, just a few more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, when we talk about the student learning, the winter break, the spring break, and the additional summer programming. Is that something that's offered to all students? How do we access that? And then my next question would be, I know when it comes to staffing, it was mentioned that we are at 8%, nationwide is 10%. So it says that we're not too far off from the numbers when it comes to the vacancy. Does that mean some of our schools are overstaffed and some of our other schools are understaffed? Because I hear a lot from community that we don't have enough staffs in our schools. So I guess I'm trying to understand a little better just how our staffing, how we are proportioned across the board when it comes to our schools.
Yeah, I can start and feel free to chime in. I think you're right, and as Tyrese shared, staffing adjustment is one way we do that. When we look at the enrollment of each of our schools, we make projections in spring and we look at that at fall. We also give our schools a lot of autonomy with money and how they spend their budget. So you won't see consistency of what staffing looks like in every school. We do have what we call predictable staffing, which ensures our community, our families, and our staff of what should be and is at every one of our schools. And that includes things like a principal, a social worker, a school secretary, the number of teachers that are in the building, a counselor. So those things are predictable across our schools. But there are many things that are not predictable, and based on what instructional leadership teams, based on what site councils and principals as leaders of their schools decide to do with the money that they have from the different funding sources that they're given as we look at budgets. Anybody else wants to add? I think there was something else I was going to say about that. I would just say about the tutoring program, I think one of the things as Dr. Fearing and I were looking at the research, one of the really interesting things is that the effectiveness of the tutoring programs goes up if it's actually during the school day, which was really interesting to us as we were looking at that. I do think as I've reached out to community organizations and community partners, as you talked about, Director Ali, one of the things they've been engaging with us is, we can do the homework help piece, but the intervention piece and understanding the curriculums you're using, we don't have that knowledge. And so I think that's one of the things we've got to look at as we're prioritizing what we're doing over the next months is when we do have community organizations, how do we help them understand and be knowledgeable in what we are teaching our students? And that's a big lift as we move forward. So Dr. El-Amin, I'm not sure I caught every one of the questions that you have. So.
Just about the winter break, spring break.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Fearing talk about registration for that.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Currently, our teams are working on planning. Again, like I've said before, one of the main considerations is staffing because we need to make sure that we have staff. What's interesting is this winter break, we'll be able to have, I hope I'm right, but we'll be able to have 4 or 5 days of consecutive programming, which in years past you have 3 one week and 3 the next week. So this year we'll actually be able to have all the students in the program 1 week, which might make it easier to get staff. So you're not committing to 3 days 1 week and you can just take off the next week, right, for a break. So we'll see about that. If nothing else, our plan Z maybe is that we'll continue to offer asynchronous offerings, but if we are unable to get staff or community organizations or the people that have generally come in and supported our schools and our students during that time, we'll still have some type of programming, but it won't be based on in-person staff. But again, our effort is to make sure that we do have in-person. So we're right now reaching out to all of our community partners that are currently in our schools, which is in one of the slides here. Our high school credit recovery will still continue as it normally has during winter break and spring break. And then, of course, looking to expand elementary options for our students. So again, I would appreciate any board support or community support so that we can have those offerings for our students at least that first week of winter break and then going into spring break for sure. I think it's one thing that I believe that some of our students and some of our families and parents, caregivers really appreciate having a place for students to go. during that long stretch of no school, but making sure that we have facilities, staffing. Often you'll need engineers, and you know, we'd like to be able to serve food, so then food service. So, and again, that's all operational and technical. But if we're going to create that space for students, I want it to be the best place for students, and not just something we rush through. So again, appreciate any support that we could get with that, but we are planning right now for the breaks and then our extended summer programming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Jordan?
Hi, thank you, Chair Ellison. Just to kind of piggyback on what Directors El-Amin and Cerrillo had said, yeah, with the online tutor training, I mean, I know that's not the best fit for everyone, but when it comes to devices, you know, there are some sites, okay, so a couple of sites I've been to last year, teachers were allowed to sign out the devices in their classroom, right? For that 1 hour that student was there, in case a student didn't have a device or they forgot it at their parents' house because they have custodial arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. And teachers found that, a couple of sites I've been to, the teachers found that system worked because they knew the student, they knew that the student had that device, and they would give it back at the end of that hour. That worked last year. However, this year at some sites, what's happened is the district has said, somebody here in this building has said, we're not going to do that this year. We're going to take it all away from the teachers and we're going to put it into the library. So you have to walk down to the library, you have to sign it out, and you can keep it all day or you can bring it back, and sometimes more often than not, those devices are not being returned or tracked properly, and we're losing devices. And I'm just kind of curious to know who made that decision, and did they consult teachers and say what system actually works for you, so you have accountability for your students, to make sure the students are accountable for the devices that we are loaning them for the hour? Because, you know, I was at a school where a student did not have a device, and this student happened to be one of only a couple students of color in this classroom, and he did not have a device, and everybody else did. And this student went to the library, but because of the situation I had just described, this student didn't have a device. There was no device left in that building for this student to have. So that student sat there the entire classroom time and just sat there. When I went in the classroom with the administrator of that school, that student was just sitting there. Had nothing to do because they didn't have a device for whatever reason. Beyond the student's control, whatever. I don't really want to get into it. But had the protocol from last year been in place, where the teachers are responsible for the devices in that specific room for that specific hour on that specific day, that student would have had a device and would not have been just sitting there. Now, I know that's not your fault, or I don't know, but all I'm saying is that we can't allow that to happen. I mean, our students of color are already falling apart. You know, they're falling behind, they have, you know, things that are beyond their control, mental health. I mean, it's things that are outside of the classroom that we have no influence on, but we're trying our best, to do that. I mean, if we can't, I mean, we have to be able to provide them the resources in the building. And so I would just like to see that somehow we can return to what was working for our teachers last year in our schools. I don't care if it's at Washburn, I don't care if it's at Page, Sanford, wherever these systems where I've witnessed them that were working last year, why not just go back to what was working? And we're keeping track of our Chromebooks and our devices and taxpayers' dollars for you conservatively conscious financial people. But I mean, we have to, you know, if we want to extend an olive branch to our teachers and to our community and say, yes, we are willing to trust our people with the devices. They know what's best for their students. They know their students. Why not just let them do it? You know, I don't know why we keep putting up, to me, it just seems like a roadblock, you know, that we just keep throwing up. And it sounds, I know it sounds really trite about it, but come on, I was actually really mad leaving that classroom, seeing one of the only 2 kids of color in that classroom just sitting there. Nobody, you know, the teacher, you know, I'm sure tried her hardest to find that student a device, but if we're just letting them fly out of the library, you know, and it's a big school that I was at. There wasn't no K-5 school or nothing. This was a big school. I just think that we need to really just simplify things, and I think that's pretty simple. It's not that hard to do, I don't think. I've seen it done at Sanford. I've seen it done at other schools where they have the carts and they're locked up and the teachers give them out and they get them back. When did that stop? When did that go away? You know, because I just do not like to see a student of color without a device in a predominantly white classroom where everyone else does. I don't know how that's fair. I don't think that's right. And I think we need to correct that. Not tomorrow, not tonight, but pretty darn soon. So I would like to see that happening. One last thing with the enrollment. You know, the official projections won't come in till, what, end of the month, November-ish. So if we're looking at even just the projected numbers that we have tonight, how is that going to affect implementing some of these programs? I mean, that are fantastic. How is that going to kind of slow them down? Are they, I mean, are we just, I don't know. How does that work? I mean, what would we look at, you know, if we're losing, if we have to have a budget adjustment? I mean, does that affect implementation of some of these programs? I know it's kind of a off the wall kind of question, but I'm just kind of curious how that's going to affect implementing some of these great things that we're starting to do, or that you guys are starting to do.
Yeah, I could definitely start with that one. You know, whenever we see a decrease in enrollment, that's a decrease in money for the district, absolutely. So then we get into conversations about what are our priorities and what we can. And so those will be continued conversations as we go through this next budget season, as we're looking at, are we really budgeting for the status quo? Are we budgeting for our strategic plan? And that's a really tough conversation that we're going to have this year as we move forward. So I think it's an excellent point to bring up, and it's a reality that we have to face. And it's the reason why I've been as transparent as I have about the enrollment numbers, because we are going to have difficult conversations. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and it was a great conversation, board members. I heard a lot of interest in literacy and the trainings that our staff are going through, and I heard how it's a burden for some of our staff members to get all the teachers in there. And then I think about partners and maybe swimming upstream and looking, if we find a program that is very effective for most of all of our students, maybe we start talking to teacher prep programs about, hey, this is something, you know, we have found we had to teach our teachers after they came and started with us. Maybe this is something we can start, you know, just an idea, so that teachers don't need to be teaching all day and then having to worry about family and then doing additional training, so that they can help our students. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the policy committee report. I'm just going to keep moving, guys. Are we okay? All right. Policy committee chair Inns, please go ahead with your report. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Policy committee has referred one policy revision to the board tonight for the first reading. The changes in the revision of policy 1692. And that was something that we recommended at the policy committee. It included suggested changes from the recently conducted equity consideration process. So the revisions clarify the roles and responsibilities of the site council, and they make improvements to operations to improve accessibility, inclusivity for that critical the site councils, which are the really important advisory committees. So that concludes the policy committee report.
Thank you very much. Directors, are there any questions for the policy committee report? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Chair Inns and committee members for the work on this policy. We will see that, like Chair Inns said, we will see that next month. We will be voting on that policy next month. Next, we're going to move on to action items. We'll first begin with the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes routine items that do not involve major policy, budget, or taxing decisions, bond awards, or items related to the superintendent's contract or evaluation. Director Caprini, will you please move approval of this item? So moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
Approval of the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries and the consent agenda is approved. The next item is revision of policy 4016, as Chair Inns referred to, on the Family Medical Leave Act. Director Inns, will you please give us a motion to approve this resolution, which is...
Just to clarify, this is
Yes.
a different one.
This is a different one, yes.
Okay. Motion to approve this revision?
And this is for Family Medical Leave Act policy, labeled as 2022-54. Can I get a second? Resolution 2022-54, revising policy 4016 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries and policy revision is approved. Our final item this evening is a time for directors to give brief update on the committees they chair or any other board-related activities. Directors, if you have comments, please hit your request to speak button, and I'll run through the list. Student Representative Wesson.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to provide an update on our citywide student leadership board. We had our kickoff event today during the school day. A lot of great students came together to kind of form relationships and get ready for this important year in citywide. Superintendent Cox joined us along with some familiar faces on the cabinet, joined citywide members to have a conversation just to get to know members and get to form relationships. I think it was a really great time, and I look forward to seeing what else we can do this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Caprini.
Oh, thank you. Minnesota School Board Association. Our last meeting was last Saturday, Sunday, and we discussed the resolutions for the legislative session. So I'm looking forward to working with some of my colleagues in, I think it's December, on that legislative conversation with folks from all over the state. The other thing I wanted to mention, a couple of, you're all aware that it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month and Domestic Violence Month. A very dear heart friend of mine is having an event on October 22nd at Park Nicollet, St. Louis Park, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. They're going to be doing free breast examinations. And then also Phyllis Wheatley is hosting a domestic violence forum October 28th from 4:30 to 7:30. So I hope you can try and make it to that. The last thing is, I want to give a big shout out to my bookend high schools. There we go. North and Henry are undefeated, and I couldn't be prouder. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone gives a big shout out to our bookend high schools. Super proud. Thanks. I'm done.
Thank you. Director Arneson.
Thanks. I have a YCB update, Youth Coordinating Board. We heard tonight that goal 2 of the strategic plan is the student well-being part, where youth enrichment program, we want it to be appropriately resourced and staffed across MPS. That was a goal. And so per our joint meeting that we had in August with the Park Board, the discussion there, I mentioned the YCB is assisting in their review of existing options at our schools with the intent to provide parks and schools information about sites that could use strategic investment, either financial or with potential partners that could be a good fit. So both entities are now in agreement, and so we mentioned I would be giving updates at this time. So the staff from the parks and schools are supposed to be meeting with the YCB immediately after MEA to gather initial info and to plan their next steps. So our ask is to have this kind of complete so that they're in time to make adjustments even mid-year. So I just wanted to update the colleagues that that discussion is continuing to happen and move forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just like to share with you, and I'm sure you are aware, the Council of Great City Schools Conference will take place next week in Orlando, Florida, and the council brings together the 77 large school districts, and most of the people who will be attending are the people is like superintendents, school board members, and so on. So I just like to share with you that great opportunity for us to enhance our knowledge and skills of how to govern this school district. And I also like to share with you, I lost a friend of mine last week, and he was a great leader. His name was Mukhtar Thakur. He recently retired from Minnesota Department of Transportation, and he was a great community leader. And I just want to, on our behalf, pass our condolences to his family. There are a lot of great leaders that whom we have lost past the few years, due to some of them due to COVID, some of them some other accidents. And we went through a lot. Despite we're trying to improve our education system here, but also we need to recognize that the communities are going through a lot. And all of us, we need to do some self-care, despite really sometimes, we go through a tough time. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Ali. Director Sorillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am honored to be the representative for the school board in the City Planning Commission. That requires a lot of time. I'm filling in for the school board member that resigned, so I attended my very first meeting last Monday. So yes, exciting. Looking forward to new adventures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I can talk about, there was a number of activities throughout the district that I attended, the groundbreaking for Career Tech Ed, the Festival Day Emerson. I went to Latino Parent Advisory Committee, Special Ed Advisory Committee, the Black Parent Advisory Committee. Our Hmong Advisory Committee, I did not attend, Smiley, but these parent advisory committees meet every month. If that's something you're interested in, you can find the day and time on our website. I would highly encourage folks to get involved that way. Some are meeting still virtually, some are meeting in person, but it's on the website. I went to the Urban Debate League and watched students debate NATO, which was a lot of fun. And then I just attended, we all did, last week, our first Superintendent Search Committee meeting. I want to remind folks that the board will now meet the first Tuesday of the month to conduct superintendent search work. At our meeting last week, we heard from a representative from the Council of Great City Schools, the conference we're about to attend, who provided us with national context and best practices for superintendent searches. Video of that meeting and the document he shared with us, along with many other resources on the superintendent search process, can be found on our website at board.mpls.k12.mn.us/SUPT-search. That's SUPT search, SEARCH. Our next superintendent search meeting is November 1st, and we'll review proposals for contracted community engagement facilitator to support our efforts. We're seeking this community engagement facilitator to provide support to board members who will be hosting listening sessions in community in November, December 2022 as part of the superintendent search process. Examples of support include arranging meeting logistics, including communications, note-taking, and compiling raw and sorted qualitative data. If you or someone you know is able to help us with that, proposals are due October 17th, and a request for proposal can be found on the Superintendent Search website. That concludes our agenda for this meeting for today. Our next meeting will be Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, October 25th at 6 p.m. Without objection, I will now adjourn this meeting. Good night, everyone.